All right, well, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Kay Stefanik. I am the Assistant Director of the Iowa Nutrient Research Center. I want to thank you all for joining us for the Iowa Learning Farms Conservation webinar. Today's speaker is Shane Wulf, Wetlands Project Manager with Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. He's going to be talking about water quality wetlands in Iowa. And before we get started today, please type in any questions you have to the chat, and I will read them off to Shane at the end of the presentation. All right, floor is all yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kay, and thanks to Iowa Learning Farms for having me on here today. Also, thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy days and being willing to stay over the lunch hour in the webinar here. I know it's a nice summer day out there, so certainly appreciate that. So as Kate mentioned, my role with the Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship is a wetlands project manager. Work with the specifically within the Division of Soil and Water Conservation under the Water Resources Bureau, and have a team that we work with specifically on water quality wetland implementation, primarily in support of Iowa's nutrient reduction strategy, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. In case not, this is an effort to reduce nitrate and phosphorus loading to basically streams, ditches, rivers, eventually making their way to the Gulf of Mexico. And the reason I wanted to share this first slide, again, a lot of this is probably maybe a little bit of repeat information, but it's just to kind of show that there's no, silver bullet for conservation. There's different practices that provide different opportunities and may fit different landowners, farmers, operations. But the y-axis here basically shows our percent or anticipated nitrate reduction, and our x-axis kind of categorizes to the 4 of the main categories of some of the different practices within the nutrient reduction strategy. And so listed as number 4 there is our wetlands that we'll be talking about today. And it just kind of shows that these practices have the ability to treat significant amounts of upstream drainage areas that often are majority cropland, and provide a really good kind of bang for your buck when it comes to water quality improvement, specifically nitrate reduction. And so water quality wetlands, just at a kind of the highest level, are wetlands that are strategically located and designed to remove nitrate from tile drainage water from upland cropland areas. And the larger the wetland, the more removal we'll see. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the specific siting criteria based on our partnership with Iowa State University. We've developed design criteria that kind of maximizes reduction, without requiring too much land to be taken out of production, just kind of to fit that maximum opportunity there. And so first, I thought it would be just helpful to share that there's a long, rich history within the department of working on these water quality wetlands, primarily in partnership with the Farm Service Agency and the Iowa State University with what's called the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. Some of you may be familiar with this program, some may not, but basically what it is a partnership between IDALS and FSA, where a associated 15-year CRP contract is placed in support of a water quality wetland, in addition to a conservation easement that's held by the local soil water conservation district. And basically it's supportive of these water quality wetlands. One thing to note on this program is that it is specifically targeting wetland implementation on and along the Des Moines lobe, which you can see kind of in that north central extending down into the central part of Iowa. And so this is just kind of a basic map that shows where a lot of these wetlands have historically been placed over the last 20 years or so. But you'll see that they're starting just to kind of see some blue dots popping up in other parts of the state. And And that we'll go through in a little bit more detail, but we basically have additional funding programs that can help scale up implementation. Still, working very much so in north central Iowa along the Des Moines Lobe, on and along the Des Moines Lobe, but also expanding into some of our other priority watersheds in the state. So to date, we have roughly 130 water quality wetlands that have been installed, primarily using this CREP program that I've discussed. But you'll see that we're up to around 24 non-CREP sites. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the different programs that we've used for some of those sites here shortly. Historically, we've just had the funding capability to do 3 to 5 projects per year, and that's one of the big things that we're working on, is scaling that up. We'd like to see dozens of these projects installed per year, and working with partners and these newer programs. That is definitely the goal within our team. So, I mentioned that some of these projects, of course, have used CREP for the last several years. But, we made it a priority to start working on some of these other, high priority watersheds in the state. And back in about 2016, Senate File 512 basically provided water quality infrastructure funding in support of Iowa's water quality initiative. And that kind of opened the door to, basically investigating and looking at projects in those different priority watersheds. We also knew that there's an opportunity to leverage funding working with some of our federal and private partners. So we've worked on a handful of sites using different programs like EQIP, RCPP, just general CRP. Again, I'm guilty as a government employee of using a lot of acronyms. It's not necessarily important to understand the details of these programs for this discussion, but just to understand that that's one of our roles, is to work with these landowners, work with the farmers, and kind of in the background try to understand, okay, what different programs fit to help offset construction costs and easement costs for these projects. One of the things when I first started with the Department of Ag and Land Stewardship back in 2018, you'll see there was one program on there listed as the Gulf of Mexico program with EPA. And so that we had a specific grant, transforming drainage grant, where we worked on some wetland projects, other edge of field practices that help support some innovative, type designs that we'll get into a little bit. We have funders like Ducks Unlimited, Iowa Pork Producers Association, Nature Conservancy. Those are just a few examples of some of the, private nonprofit groups out there that are also helping support implementation of these projects. And, just in addition to the financial part of that, there's a lot of technical components to these projects. A lot of permitting work that goes into these, design work that goes into these. We're working with a lot of times established drainage infrastructure. And the first group we have listed there are the soil and water conservation districts. I mentioned earlier that we work with landowners to establish a conservation easement, usually either a 30-year or a perpetual easement that helps protect the lifespan of the water quality wetland. And the reason that Soil and Water Conservation District and the commissioners are such a critical partner for this programs is because IDALS does not actually have the authority to hold conservation easements. That is specifically something outlined in code that the SWCDs have the ability to do. So very important that we work with them. Of course, NRCS and FSA, great from a funding support, but also just, a lot of technical expertise there in helping us. Ducks Unlimited is helping put together everything from concept designs through, helping us with actually some of the engineering work through also cost sharing and helping with construction costs too. So they've been a great partner. Drainage district counties, other municipalities, all important because they're all certain requirements that for approval for working on existing drainage district tile to floodplain permits through counties, other municipalities. A lot of times we will outsource our design work to private engineering firms. I'm sure some are on the call today, so appreciate you guys joining us. Always enjoy working with them to help facilitate design work on these, contractors across the state helping build these projects, and then some of the other groups like I mentioned too, just helping provide that kind of technical support. So this slide, I just wanted to add in there kind of, to just give a quick illustration of a lot of the different steps that go into. I don't expect you to read every one of these little boxes, but we worked with the Soil and Water Conservation Society. I worked with Catherine DeLong when she was there, and had a good time kind of trying to spew out all of the different steps that go into a project from initial conversation through construction. And we typically say that's about an 18 to 24 month period, but there are a lot of things that can be outside of our control. And so me, along with our team and all of the different partners I work through, these are all the different types of steps that we have to get through. And it can be a bit maddening at times. I don't know if there's any It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia fans out there, but like sometimes we feel like Charlie, and just trying to get a project from start to finish. But that's why it's so important that we have this partnership and working together with everybody. And so just really basic, jumping into some of the kind of different wetlands that we're working on, thought it'd be helpful just to kind of give a really high level overview of how water quality wetlands work. And so, as water moves through the wetland, microbes are consuming nitrate and then converting that nitrate to an inert N2 gas, basically to coming out at the outlet structures cleaner and lesser concentrations and load of nitrate. And so really it's microbes that are doing the heavy lifting in these systems. And really we've working with Iowa State University have gotten a good handle on different characteristics that kind of make our wetlands perform well. And everything from trying to understand the appropriate contributing drainage areas to how big we should design the wetlands to be based on how much drainage area is coming into the system. One thing we definitely understand is that row crop systems is leaky systems. That's the areas where we're targeting where we're going to get most of our nitrate removal. The reason I put the words 100-year storm event in there, these are full flow structures, but there are still bounce associated with these wetlands when we get large rain events. And so when we are developing these projects, we ensure that the 100-year storm events in what we call breakpoint wetlands are contained to ensure that we're not going to negatively impact surrounding row crop. And we work with landowners to negotiate that easement. We also make sure that any tile that is draining into the wetlands are able to continue to function by making sure that there's a foot of separation between the outlet elevation and the normal pool elevation. Buffer seating, I just thought I'd throw that in there too. Just, that's something we work with the local NRCS field offices on to make sure we're using appropriate mixes of grasses and forbs in the easement area surrounding our normal wetland pools. And I guess just to give you like a really kind of rough understanding of kind of sizing. So we typically look to size these projects anywhere between 0.5% to 2% of the contributing drainage area. So if you have 200 acres coming in, we're looking for at least a 1 acre to upwards of a 4 acre wetland pool to appropriately, most effectively reduce the most nitrate, best bang for your buck, basically. And then of course, we're looking at targeting sites in the priority watersheds outlined in the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy. But we are working on projects outside that area too, especially if they can, follow and meet this other criteria. And moving into the different types of wetlands. So we've worked on several, vast majority of our projects have been what we consider breakpoint wetlands. Basically, we're at the bottom of large concentrated areas of drainage, oftentimes below where a large tile outlets, and we put an embankment across the ditch and allow that water to pool up behind it using a sheet pile weir structure. It's a full flow structure. And just to give you a sense of scale here, there's a gentleman there down here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but the bottom left-hand portion of the berm, you can see a person. So it kind of gives you an idea of the scale there. The blue would be considered line that's surrounding the wetland pools, kind of our normal pool elevation. And that red line is what would the negotiated easement boundary would be. So usually, nature doesn't create straight lines. So our 100-year event is often, not going to follow row patterns or anything like that. And that's where we just ensure that the easement contains that amount, but then we work with the landowners to, make sure it accommodates their operations as well. And these designs for these projects are constantly evolving, based off of feedback we get from our partners. And so things that my understanding, since I've just been on here for a few years, but earlier we didn't necessarily incorporate sediment forebays on the upstream end of our wetlands. This is an awesome opportunity to extend the life of our projects by allowing that upstream sediment that may be delivered to the wetland to settle out before entering the main pool. You also see there, it calls out submerged berms, which basically encourages mixing and forces water to serpentine its way through the system. This is a photo of a project that's just wrapping up construction right now. And we took it about 2 weeks ago, and Matt Frana, if anyone's familiar with him, he helped take these for us. And I just thought it really illustrated some of those unique design components, because this is not at full flow, or at normal pool elevation. So they'll eventually put stop logs into the water control structure, which will fill the pool to its normal pool elevation. So you can see on the bottom right-hand photo there, or right-hand corner of the photo, that sheet pile weir structure where water will eventually be flowing over. But yeah, just thought this photo did a good job illustrating that. Excavated wetlands. This is a project that we did in Black Hawk County, where the landowner basically had issues with his existing grassed waterway. And, in order to meet NRCS specifications, the grassed waterway was going to, if we wanted to basically work with them, it was just a privately done grass waterway, but to meet specs, it was going to have to be very, very wide, because we had upwards of 450 or so acres of drainage coming into this. And so what we ended up doing was excavating a pool within this yellow easement area, and it added construction costs to do that much excavation. We try to use the natural topography if possible, but one of the ways we could justify some additional construction costs for a site like this is that we are able to maintain a small footprint as far as the easement goes, because we pay the landowner the Iowa State Land Value Survey, and cash rent are all things that go into the easement calculator for the payment that the landowners are provided. This is a really awesome photo that Vern Fish from the Black Hawk Soil and Water Conservation District shared with us of the wetland now that it's becoming more well established. I thought it was a really cool photo, so I just thought I'd add that in just so you guys can kind of see what it looks like now, now that it's well established. Tile zone wetlands. Just wanted to quickly talk about those projects. These are sites higher in the landscape, projects where we're basically working in a lot of times in central Iowa and the prairie pothole region, where we know that there's these pothole wetlands that are often problematic and challenging for landowners and farmers to try to farm. So the idea is, well, what if we use this low value, well, not low value, but lower productive grounds or lower producing grounds, and use it for a wetland. And so we worked with Iowa State University and our private engineers. This is just, again, just an engineering drawing to kind of show you the in-between step. Of course, it's important that these are fully designed and provided good engineering on the projects, but then this is just kind of what it looks like after, right? So we basically intercepted the drainage district main that was running through the pothole and provided it the opportunity to outlet into the blue pool area. And a yellow line would be that negotiated easement boundary. And just want to make sure I cover all of these while I've got time here. So I'll move on. I'm glad to talk about these in further detail and during the questions and answers. So this is another site kind of in that same prairie pothole region. This one's in Story County. And you can see it's pretty evident the center of your screen there where they were just struggling with crops being drowned out. Went through the same type of process as a tile zone wetland, right? So looking for the ability to intercept the drainage district main that ran through the depression. And one of the challenges that comes with tile zone wetlands is that we have to, that are gravity, gravity flow, is that we have to intercept the tile at an elevation that allows for it to naturally outlet to the proposed pool area. And so what you can run into, and we did in this situation, is basically we had to try to do that connection on a private landowner that originally was on board with the project and was willing to work with that with us to do that connection, but later decided that they did not want to participate, which we were concerned that had the ability to kill the project. But basically, Dr. Crumpton and his team decided, okay, well, what if we looked at doing a pumping system? So we worked with Bolton and Mink to actually put in a lift station or a pump that's pointed out here that would be directly over that tile main. And that way we were able to maintain the footprint of the project on the property of the participating landowners. And so that's a really, pumped wetlands we think have a lot of opportunity moving forward, just because of the ability to, minimize impacts to surrounding neighbors. Floodplain wetlands are another type of project that we've worked on. This was a landowner that had existing pasture that, he basically wanted to see if there was some sort of opportunity to do some sort of wetland project with. And so we're in Hardin County here, and we have a river system running right through, south of the proposed project area. And you'll see on the north end of this bend, if you can see my cursor, that there's a very intermittent stream that runs down and eventually outlets into the river. Well, the idea was, what if we can capture some of that water before it enters the river, give it the opportunity to go through that denitrification process and then outlet into the river down below. Same thing, went through the design process with an engineering firm who came up with a proposed design where we would basically incorporate a riffle structure into the project area and divert water through a tile system into this proposed or this existing wetland area. And you can see that's what the easement area ended up. And then down here is the outlet structure where that water that originally came through the riffle structure eventually dumps into the river, after going through the wetland system. So one that's kind of innovative technology I mentioned earlier, and has a lot of wetland characteristics, kind of taking a similar approach as drainage water recycling. Worked with Matt Helmers and Chris Hay from Iowa Soybean Association. They've provided a lot of guidance through one of those EPA grants I'd mentioned before. And, we kind of are looking at this similarly to our constructed wetland programs, but trying to understand if there's a way to maybe provide an opportunity where landowners could benefit from, the projects outside of some of the really awesome, water quality and wildlife benefits we see with them. And so the idea here was we were in Calhoun County, and this crop ground to the west is basically a lot of sandy ground. And so the idea was, is there any way to try to pump water from something like we would do with a water quality wetland and incorporate a pivot system that could be used to basically recycle the water that was captured. And so that's exactly what we ended up doing. So we used a very similar approach. You'll see a couple photos here on the next slide. You use a sheet pile weir structure to intercept a intermittent stream, and basically that water that's captured is stored, and it's a full flow structure, just like our wetland, our breakpoint wetlands. But then again, the landowner has the ability to pull some of that water and bring it into a pivot. And so this landowner said basically this last year with the drought conditions, it actually saved his popcorn crop. So it's been cool to see that success with that project, and Matt Helmers and his team are continuing to do research and to understand the nitrate removal associated with this type of project. So I just wanted to add this, and I know it doesn't necessarily fit exactly that water quality wetland criteria, but it's just some of the new innovative things we're doing based off of things we've learned with wetlands. So again, this is that drainage water recycling site. So you can see that same sheet pile weir system, some nice photos of some swans that came off the pool area when we walked up on it. So it was pretty neat recently after construction there. And then we're also working on drainage water recycling on different types of systems that more closely resemble like our tile zone wetlands we were talking before, where we'd intercept and actually pump directly from existing drainage mains into a reservoir that could be used in the same type of approach. So that's just a photo of the pool area from this spring. Really awesome landowners to work with on this site, and we're excited to continue to see the research that comes from this project. In addition, we very much our goal with these projects is water quality improvement, right? But we know based off of research from Dr. Adam Janke and his team, this provides wonderful wildlife habitat, and specifically for birds, that native buffer seating surrounding the pool area, along with some of the emergent wetland vegetation that we get within the pool system, great food source for all sorts of different critters, creates excellent pollinator habitat. So that's one of the things I really appreciate and enjoy in getting to work with these wetland projects is just to kind of see, landowners at the end of the day, farmers at the end of the day, once these sites are well established, they really become a pretty beautiful system that's working 24/7 for water quality improvement. So I think it's a win-win. I'd be lying if I didn't say that we don't run into challenges, from identifying, old tile system that, the last couple of years I mentioned were pretty darn dry. So that is something that sometimes will happen. We'll have, maybe a small wet spot develop, and we'll work with landowners to make sure we, address those issues. We do the best we can to design these to function properly on the front end. And then, it's just not a build it and we're gone. We have wetland field specialists through a partnership with the Iowa Drainage District Association that does annual inspections on our sites to make sure the easements are being, basically maintained and the projects are functioning so that we get those water quality benefits, but then also these additional benefits I've been discussing here. And so in summary, I just, hope you took away and got maybe a little bit better understanding of some of the work that the department has done on these projects, for the last 20 years. But maybe learned a little bit about some of the new programs and initiatives that are helping support different types of alternative landscape type projects today. working in new areas. There's a large learning curve because we're working on different types of practices, or excuse me, different types of designs, working with Soil and Water Conservation District field offices, all kinds of different partners that may have not had an opportunity to do these types of practices before, just because we're expanding our geography. And so, at the end of the day, we're working to scale up implementation. We have over 60 sites that are currently under development, somewhere between sort of that initial design phase through sites under active construction. So we're hoping that we'll surely be able to continue to scale up and see more of these wetland projects in the ground. So very much again appreciate you taking the time over your lunch break to let me share what we do, and glad to try to answer the best I can any follow-up questions anyone may have. Here is just my email and phone number. Anyone that may have some interest in a potential wetland, feel free to either shoot me an email, give me a phone call, or another option would be to visit your local Soil and Water Conservation District USDA Service Center to inquire. They can always reach out to us as well. So again, appreciate your time, and I'll move to the slides on CE or CEUs. Okay.
All right, thank you for that great presentation. So we just have a few housekeeping items before we get into the questions. And if you have a question, please type that into the chat box. So for those of you who are attending to get a Certified Crop Advisor Continuing Education Unit, please send an email to Elena Whitaker today by 5 p.m. with your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, as well as your number in order to get credit for that. And next slide. The Learning Farms is also doing a voluntary demographic information survey. So if you're interested in participating in that survey, please scan the QR code or go to the website listed on the slide to fill that out. If you've already filled it out this year, you don't need to fill it out again. We just ask that you fill it out one time in 2023. And next week, the presenter is going to be Jen Ripp with the agroforestry educator with the Savannah Institute, and she's going to be talking about incorporating trees to your farm with agroforestry. Right? Now on to the questions. So I had someone ask, what would be a typical hydraulic retention time for the designed wetlands?
Yeah, so the typical design for the hydraulic retention time is really going to depend site by site, is my understanding. And it's something that we just have to get, basically get engineering support to basically figure out what's going to be most efficient. Iowa State University also helps provide engineering review on our projects. I know in my experience of working with like bioreactors and saturated buffers, we looked for anywhere from 4 to 8 hours of retention time was kind of the goal through that. But I think it's going to vary a bit more in some of our water quality systems, especially with these alternative designs. So I'm sorry I don't have a great answer for that, because I hate saying that it depends, but I think that is kind of the case with some of these projects.
Okay, and the next question is, how can local governments support IDOL's effort to improve water quality?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that, in working with local governments, our soil and water conservation districts, like I mentioned before, providing that support of holding conservation easements and working with us is certainly critical to the success of this programs. But some of you may be familiar with some of the new batch and build efforts that are out there, where we're basically working to put in several saturated buffers, bioreactors at one time, where a fiscal agent will basically, oftentimes some sort of local government entity will help support construction of several practices at one time and offload, basically helping offset a lot of the front end work that a lot of times the landowners have traditionally had to do in the traditional cost share model. And so long term, that we're looking at potential options of doing those same types of partnerships for water quality wetlands as well, and actually have a couple in the works. So we think that there's a great opportunity to work with different forms of local government in that manner as well.
How long does one of these typically take to get through the Corps? I'm assuming that's related to permitting.
Yeah. So question regarding to permitting, kind of the two main permits that we usually have to work through would be with the Corps of Engineers and then the DNR if we're in an existing floodplain. Right now, with the recent Supreme Court ruling, with the Sackett case, where we are experiencing some delays. Typically, it's a couple 2 to 3 months between the time we will submit an application through issuance of a permit. But I think they are currently waiting for guidance from headquarters on what this recent court ruling means and how it'll impact decision making from their ends. But it's definitely something that can, we kind of talked about those different kind of things that can hold a project up for a little while, and that is one of the things that we do experience with some of our sites from a permitting standpoint, especially because the rules are always changing, and we have to try to adapt to that with our programs.
Who is in charge of operating and maintaining the pump for pumped wetlands?
Yeah, so with the pumped wetlands, that will be something that basically with our conservation easements, the Soil and Water Conservation District and the Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship are the ones that manage the water levels. And so that's not like the landowners are going to have to go out and turn on and off the pumps or anything like that. That is something that the department and working with the wetland field specialists and the conservation districts will do.
How can SWCD commissioner support efforts to expand wetlands in their county?
It's a great question too. So we worked on a kind of outreach campaign this last year for basically counties that have existing wetlands and to basically try to provide an kind of overview of the district's role in holding conservation easements. But I think just keeping consideration of wetlands as a tool in the toolbox. They're not going to fit everywhere across the state, but just hopefully considering myself and members of our team as a resource and helping support. If you have somebody that you think is interested, we are more than happy to help review sites and provide feedback. And yeah, I absolutely love working with the soil and water conservation districts across the state. So
what type of funding is available for these projects?
Yeah, so all sorts of, we get creative in partnering funding, different funding programs that are out there. I'd say our primary programs that we use would be the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, partnership between IDALS and FSA, and then Water Quality Initiative funding through the state, along with Senate File 512 water quality infrastructure, but several different NRCS programs, things like that can help support these projects, to other CRP options. And then we also are getting support from private funders as well. So all sorts of different opportunities to help get these projects installed.
Oh, this is a different question. Do you have a preferred river, lake, or wetland area in Iowa that you enjoy for outdoor recreation?
I will say, so I worked for several years in the Middle Cedar and in Blackhawk and Tama counties, and that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I very much enjoy that area, but I gotta say, like the Upper Iowa and the Turkey is also very beautiful. Enjoy camping and canoeing. I was just actually down up there a few weeks ago and really enjoy that area as well.
Right, so I'm going to give people a few more minutes to type any additional questions they have into the chat box, and I'm going to ask a question real quick. So you mentioned sediment forebays are being added to some of the newer wetlands. How often do you think those would need to be cleaned out? And who would be responsible for that clean out?
Yeah, so the idea here is that we are, working on basically creating systems that are not a maintenance hassle for the landowner. And so within our conservation easements, they have a 30-year maintenance agreement that's built into them, regardless of whether they do a permanent or a 30-year easement. And so the goal with our sediment forebays is that they at least eclipse that 30-year window. If it's less than 30 years and those sediment forebays were to have filled up, we would work with the landowner to try to understand what caused it. And so the easement maintenance agreements are with the landowners, but IDALs will often help support repairs in situations where it was out of a landowner control or something like that. So and it's kind of another depends answer, but the maintenance agreement is with the landowner.
And I had somebody ask if you could go back to your email address.
Oh, sure. There you go.
So you mentioned if somebody's interested in having one of these wetlands constructed on their land to contact you, is there any information that would be helpful for them to send you initially?
Yeah, so basically what we'll do when we evaluate, so we have Casey Judge, she works for within our team. She's a GIS specialist, and she basically is able to do a lot of kind of off-site review ahead of any actual field visits. And so at the most basic information, just the latitude, longitude, or section, township, and range, those are kind of at the minimum. We'll just need to know a location. But any additional information you might have as far as existing tile information, any history or understanding of what the soils look like in that area, all that's very helpful as well. If willing to share things like wetland determinations, basically the more information, the better, but the minimum would just be the general location of the potential site. And we can kind of get creative and see if some of these different types of designs could fit in the landscape.
And just had two more questions come in. Don't the engineering designs call for a minimum 100-year lifespan based on soil erosion and sedimentation?
Good question. I don't know. That's something I'll have to follow up, and I'm not 100% sure on that.
Then does NRCS provide cost share for any of this work?
Yeah, so we have had NRCS help support some of these projects through different funding sources like the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, or EQIP. There's also the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, RCPP is what you'll often hear it referred to. And so what we'll do in those types of situations is we'll work with the landowner who will establish a contract with NRCS. And then the landowner will actually end up, because the state will publicly bid the wetland for construction, and we'll basically pay all costs associated with construction up front. And then following NRCS certification that the project meets standards and specifications, the payment associated with those federal contracts will be reimbursed to NRC or to the state to basically help offset some of our upfront costs. So it gets a little tricky, and we're still working to kind of improve efficiencies, but we've had some projects installed that way that have been very successful.
And how many of these different types of wetlands have been constructed in Iowa to this point?
Sure. So I would say of the 130 installed, I would estimate that probably about 115 of those would be that traditional breakpoint style site where you have like a sheet pile weir structure. Some of our smaller sites we've used aluminum toe wall structures. And we've done a handful of tile zone wetlands, a handful of floodplain wetlands, and then we're very early in kind of development of our pumped wetlands. There's only one pumped wetland in the state, and then in addition to, that we've been involved with, and then the 2 drainage water recycling systems. So that's something that we're really trying to continue to understand, just because it's new to us. So yeah, just based off those numbers, you'll see we're still very early in implementation and scaling up on the alternative design sites, but with the 15 or so we've got, we've learned a lot.
And does IDOLS have a goal for maybe the next 5-10 years on how many additional wetlands they want implemented?
Yeah, so Secretary Naig's goal is basically to get us to doing at least 30 wetlands per year is the goal that's been I've heard shared. So at least 30 is where we are trying to get to have installed per year.
What funds are being set aside for future maintenance to avoid funding constraints?
Could you please repeat that question?
What funds are being set aside for future maintenance to avoid funding constraints?
Well, so the maintenance, as I mentioned before, within the easement, the maintenance is with the landowners, but as the state continues to have funding through the water quality infrastructure and the conservation reserve enhancement program, those dollars have been used to support repairs, as during my time with the department, and I definitely see that continuing to the foreseeable future.
Right, and then the last question I have is, how important do you think tile zone wetlands, either passive or pumped, will be to scaling up overall implementation of wetlands?
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Kay, you're cutting out a bit. You want to repeat that question?
Sure, I'll repeat that. How important will tile zone wetlands, either passive or pumped, be to scaling up implementation?
Yeah, thanks. I got caught at that time. I think they're going to be critical, and critical to because a large majority of the projects we've done to this point, based off the rules and changes we've had regarding permitting through the Corps of Engineers, we wouldn't be able to get a lot of our projects permitted without compensatory mitigation requirements. So basically buy credits to put sites in, which we just don't have the ability or funding to do. So doing these alternative designs higher in the landscape are going to be critical to the success of scaling up, in my opinion.
Well, I think that's our last question. Shane, thank you again for presenting today. And I want to thank our audience for attending. Do you have any final words?
No, that's thanks again. Appreciate the questions. I'm sorry I gave a few depends answers there, but glad to try to dig up additional information. If you weren't happy with how I answered something, yeah, feel free to reach out, and glad to try to dig up additional info for you. So thanks again, Kay.
Okay, great. I'm going to stop the recording now.